Alright, in this lecture we're going to be talking just a little bit about drawing bodies. Now I can't get too much into it because it gets really complicated and it would take an entire course, and hopefully someday I'll make an entire course on this, but drawing bodies and just character design in general is a huge topic. And so I'm just going to try to get as much information or some of the most important points into this section as I possibly can. So one of them is kind of drawing the body roughly, but I can't really get into the detail of anatomy or anything like that. Let's go ahead and get started. So when you're drawing the body, the best way to draw is to break it down into simple forms. Before you start getting all complicated and adding in muscles and shoulders and all of that, you just want to break it down as simple as possible. And I think one of the simplest ways to break down is to just draw it as cubes. So for example, I can go ahead and just draw a cube like this. Make sure you're drawing this on a separate layer. You can see I'm just kind of incorporating some of my own perspective. I'm not actually drawing perspective guidelines or anything. Like, I'm not drawing these lines going back to a vanishing point. It just would take too long. Plus I'm going to have other cubes in here that are going to be in a different perspective, so I don't want to take my time to do that. Alright, but this would represent something like the chest. And then we could go ahead and do the pelvis area. So the pelvis area, we can maybe angle it outwards more. Oops, I have it in my brush. Bring my brush size up so I can see that. So my pelvis area might be kind of angled outwards more, kind of more like this. It's kind of like the body is a little bent. Something like that. And then I just draw lines for the arms, just keeping it super simple. And then we can do a box for the head. So maybe the head is kind of angled more straight up and down. It's kind of looking outwards like that. And then we do the same thing for the legs. So we just want to keeping them nice and simple lines. Now there's a lot to learn about the proportions and stuff like that with the human body. We're not going to get too much into that, especially with character design, because sometimes the proportions don't matter as much. But the more you draw, the more you're going to start to understand the proportions and what looks good and what doesn't. Just draw something to simulate the hands. So something like that. And now you can see that we kind of have this character. He's got some perspective to him because we can see the top surface of the shoulder area. Whoops. Top surface there, top surface of the head, and so like we really have some perspective going on here, and this really helps us get that perspective, but do it in a really simple way. This makes drawing people so much easier. So then what we can do is we can add a new layer, or let's just stay on the same layer. It's not going to be that big of a deal if we draw on this one. And then we can just go ahead, let's bring our brush opacity back up. We can go ahead and just do things like draw a head right here, give him some shoulders. Some muscles in the arms. Give my elbow. Give him some pecs or chest or something like that. Maybe make those shoulders a little bit bigger. Maybe give him a little bit more of a jaw. I'm just going to keep this really messy. Give him a rib cage. Right, but we can just get in there, really draw out all the details of his character. Give him a kneecap. Alright, and then from there you could refine this more. Now, if you're drawing a character in a pose, it's probably a super good idea to make sure that you're drawing that character with some reference. If you're not drawing with reference, it's going to be really difficult, even if you're a skilled artist. Unless you have an insane visual library, you're going to need a little bit of reference just to make sure you're drawing everything correctly. So be sure that you actually look up some reference when you're drawing. I'm drawing this out of my head, and that's why it's not very detailed. But what I would probably do is I would go and find some actual reference and use that to guide me in my drawing. So the reference doesn't have to be in the exact same pose, but you want it to be pretty close. And then what I would do is after I have it in my rough sketch, I would add a new layer, bring down the opacity on this one, and then I could go in there and start adding in more detail and fixing things that I want to fix. So for example, I could start really detailing that nose in, give him an eyebrow. And this might be my second rough in. Maybe I want to give him some kind of mohawk or something like that. Who knows? But yeah, this would be my second rough in, and then after I did the second rough in, and I knew a little bit more about all the details, where the eyes go and all that good stuff, and I'd probably draw in all the detail of the hands, like each individual finger, for example. Right? Then what I would want to do is add a new layer, bring the opacity down on both these layers. And actually I could probably just turn that first sketch off completely. But I would turn down the opacity on the second pass of detail, and then I'd do my final drawing, and I'd really go in there and detail every little thing out, such as the eyelids, the iris. This is a really terrible example, but you get the idea. So I'd usually do 3 passes of detail when I do a character sketch. I'd start off with the super rough sketch, and then after the so that would be my super rough sketch, and then I would do my more detailed sketch, and then after that I'd do the final drawing on top of that, which would have all the details, such as the eyelids, the detail in the ears, fingernails, all of that stuff. All right, and then from there you could go ahead and paint that character. Let's have a look at another way we can draw bodies. So let's look at the female body, for example. So sometimes you can draw just by, let's add a new layer, you can draw just by drawing with ovals. So for example, I can just go ahead and start with an oval like that for the chest area, and then do another oval down here. So this is kind of more of an egg shape. This is going to be a little bit more of an oval, a little bit smaller and squattier. You'll see there's not too much space in between there, and then you want to also go ahead and just draw in kind of that center line. Let's say that we're looking at this person from the front. And then we're going to get some shoulders in here. So this is going to be a female. If it was a male, this whole oval would probably be a little bit bigger, and these shoulder circles would be a little bit bigger, but let's just keep them pretty small like that. We also want to go ahead and kind of show where the chest cavity is going to be, or the rib cage cavity, or whatever you want to call it. All right, great. And basically what we're getting here is, you can imagine that if this is a box, it's kind of like this. We're kind of seeing that bottom surface right there, and then this part is kind of angled back, so we're seeing the top surface of it like that. But what we're actually drawing is we're drawing these ovals, which are kind of rounded spherical type shapes. And that would be our neckline right there. We go ahead and add in the head. Let me go ahead and shrink this all down just so it fits a little bit better. We go ahead and add in our head. That might be a little bit too high up, so what we can do is we can go ahead and just use our grab a move tool and just nudge that down a little bit more. It looks good. All right, and then over here what we want to do is we want to start breaking this up for the legs. So I'll draw 2 lines coming across like this, and that just kind of creates that crotch area. And then we can go ahead and do the hips. It just kind of angles in like that on both sides, and then connects back up into the rib cage. And then for this, we're going to get kind of these rounded, like half bowl shapes that we're going to build the legs off of. Now, this is a slightly exaggerated body. This isn't exactly what the female body looks like. This is just an example of a type of character body you could draw. So something like anime or manga or something like that. Maybe more of a Disney animation styled character. It's pretty exaggerated. So don't take this for how you draw actual realistic bodies. Then we could just draw the thighs in there like that. They're going to be a little bit thinner at the beginning, and then they'll kind of taper out like that. And then for the breasts, it's just the same thing. Or for the arms, sorry, we'll draw the breasts in a second. For the arms, it's just basically going to be 2 lines like that. So we have our joint right there. Got our hand. Just keeping it super simple. Not sure what kind of pose we want our arms to be in necessarily. Maybe we'll just put them both up like that. It's not necessarily the best pose. This is why you want to look at reference. Find something that you really like. Tweak it. Do whatever you need to do to it. Whoops, put the thumb on the wrong side. And just get the pose to where you need it to be. You don't always have to copy the actual pose exactly. But it's always good to look at some reference. I'll make sure that when I do my final character design in this section, I'm going to be looking at some reference that you can also use as well. And then for the breasts, basically one is going to be on one side of the center line, the other one will be on the other side. Let's start somewhere up here. And the thing is that breasts, they are kind of saggy, so they're not just big round circles, so you don't just want to draw a circle in there. If you were going to block them in with anything, you want to do more of an egg shape like that. Kind of like an oval. And then you kind of get a point on that side, a point on that side. Get this under area where the shadow would be. Then you get the neck. That neck is still looking pretty freaking long, but that's alright. I'm not going to fix that right now. You get the arms, biceps. Alright, I'm not going to get too detailed with this. We can go ahead and let's switch over to our black color. Bring our brush opacity up, and then we can just go ahead and come in here and just kind of sketch this out a little bit more. Just going to keep it really rough. All these proportions, all these shapes can also be changed, especially in character design, so don't ever feel like you're limited to drawing characters and things the exact same way. It takes a lot of practice. It's going to take a lot of studying figure drawing and stuff like that. But just by drawing a few actual figure studies, you're actually going to learn a lot, and your drawings, I guarantee, will immediately improve every time you do figure drawings. From life, that is. I'm not going to get into those hands right now just because it's going to take some time, and hands are pretty complicated to draw. Right, so there's our character body or form. So that's one way you can do it. Alright, so we covered how to kind of draw a male body and a female body, but you can kind of interchange both the techniques I just showed you. But the main thing I want you to realize and remember is that when you're drawing the body, it can be really daunting, really complicated, but what you want to remember is 2 things. 1, break it down into as simple forms as possible. Just make them boxes, ovals, whatever you need, just break it down into super simple shapes, and that's going to make the process so much easier. The second thing is make sure you're looking at reference. Reference is so important. The more reference you can have, the better. You're going to be able to revert back to it and kind of see how things are shaped, how they look, the proportions, all that good stuff. And then you can take that reference and you can tweak it, you can exaggerate features, stuff like that. But just make sure that you look at some reference, especially when you're first getting started. Thanks for watching this lecture, and I'll see you guys in the next one.